So today we're talking about love. Actually, we've been talking about love for several weeks. Um, Today we're going to talk about love is not irritable. So, I read this gospel lesson and I thought about it a little bit and I went, if you take away the first verse and the last verse, which really drive us to thinking about praying without, or continually praying, perpetually praying, if we take that out, then we've got this judge and we've got this widow. And I thought, that judge, if we were to look at this in terms of prayer, that doesn't strike me as the God that I know. And if I take a look at that widow, I go, that doesn't strike me as someone who just has something they want taken care of. There's something real there. She's actually pursuing that judge. So I started thinking about it. Maybe the roles here are a little different. Maybe the roles we could flip. And perhaps we could look at that widow as God pursuing us. And it made me think about this stinker that's in the Old Testament back in Genesis. I believe his name was Jacob. So we have Jacob who steals his brother's birthright. He deceives his father into blessing him instead of his brother. And then his brother gets so enraged that Jacob decides to leave, go to his father's lands from before. On the way, he has this vision. He lays down with a stone for a pillow, and I just can't even imagine how uncomfortable that was. But he has a vision. And when he wakes up in the morning, he decides, I'm going to make a deal with God. I've been trying to make all these other deals, and things just haven't gone quite right, so I'm going to make a deal with God now. I'm going to make this deal. God, if you clothe me, if you feed me, if you return me back to my father's land safely, I'll let you be my God. What? I just imagine what God must have thought through all that. But God still pursued him, even though. So later on in the story, he gets to his Laban, his uncle's lands. And what does he do? He reverts back to himself. And through all the deceitful things that happen there, they end up running him out of town too. And on his way back, he reaches the Jabbok and he realizes that his brother is coming to meet him. Now his brother wants to kill him, or at least he thinks he does. Well, the interesting thing about the Jabbok is that is the extreme southern end of the lands promised to Abraham. So here he is, he has all his possessions crossed over, he's by himself, and he ends up wrestling this stranger all night long. And oddly enough, the stranger, in a way, lets him win. Sort of like Jesus kind of let the devil win, or think he won, but then came back and saved us all in his resurrection. So here we are, with Jacob finally realizing that this is no ordinary person that I've been wrestling with. This is God. And God renames him to Israel. Now, interestingly enough, Jacob has already stolen his brother's identity, isn't he? So he's kind of acting as someone else. And now God gives him a whole new name, Israel. Because Jacob has realized his error. He has finally accepted that God is his God. Another interesting thing about that, if you read up to that, Jacob never calls God his God. He always calls him the Father, the Lord of my father, or the God of my father. Never my God. But after this point, he always refers to him as my God. Jacob's point of conversion. And a loving God that constantly pursued him despite every wrongdoing he got himself involved in. It's just amazing. And that's what I see in this widow. This widow is just pursuing the judge, looking for a peace and a comfort and really love. Isn't she not? But then I think about the judge. And the more and more I thought about this judge, I went, that judge is me. Because in reality, I'm just like him. I can be arrogant at times. I can even deceive people with little white lies. So where are we going with this? What is it about this judge and me? So I got thinking about it, as I said, and I thought, wait a minute, when am I irritable? When do I express that I'm irritable to people or react in a bad way? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the last 2 or 3 months of my life. And it kind of sums it up a little bit. And I think you can all relate to something like this. So I'm working on this project in Georgia, continually behind on the schedule. Deadlines aren't being met. Lots of pressure from above. So along with that, I took up this little bit of education to help broaden my horizons. And I have a project and an exam to do. Well, I did that back in February, and I still haven't had a chance to complete the project. More stress. And then just as I thought we were going to, kind of get ahead and I might have some time, we had our grandchildren for 2 weekends. It was nice to have them there, but I wasn't accomplishing the other things that were on my mind. So the last weekend when our children were there, actually there was one other thing weighing very heavily on my mind. It happens every time I'm going to speak to God's people. What am I going to talk about? When is God going to give me that little hint to get me started? And I think Pastor Fred feels that way himself sometimes. So here I am worrying about what I'm going to do at Freedom Village last week, what I'm going to do here this week. And suddenly the walls start to shake and the windows are rattling and I hear this voice go, drop the attitude. Okay, I might have embellished that a little bit. It was my wife standing behind me saying, let's stop here. Let's get things straightened away. So probably was God indirectly talking to me, but it got me on the right track. It jumped me back to, you know what? God is going to take care of these things. He's going to take care of them in the proper priorities. And the priority at that time was have fun with the grandchildren. So that's what happened there. But what drove me to do that? Well, in reality, I think a lot of us react out of fear, don't we? Don't we go to fear first? We don't act in faith first. We often act in fear. And we get in this self-preservation mode, like, okay, in my case, it was like, all my time's being encroached on. What am I going to do? So I kick into fear mode, self-preservation. When I should have been looking at it as in a faith mode, approaching it from a faithful point of view where God is going to take care of things in the time they need to be taken care of. Because he's right there with me. Why should I have any doubts in that? But we all do, don't we? Don't we all kind of take that fear motive first or that direction first? So it's really hard sometimes for us to not be irritable when people address us. But then I thought about it a little more. What if someone approaches me and they know I'm a Christian, let's say either it's a stranger or somebody I know well, and I react badly when they ask me a question. Love's not supposed to be irritable, but in that instant, I may have actually turned someone away from Christ. That's a heavy thought. That's a big burden because we need to take a pause sometimes and think about what's actually happening and not just react. But then I carried it a little further because I just can't leave things alone. So I carried it a little further and I thought, in reality, there's a life hanging in the balance here. If I turn someone away from Christ, their eternal life is not what it's supposed to be. It's not what Jesus came to do for us. So as you think about this week, or think about even this reading or this talk this morning, look to God, look to Jesus and say, help me to react not in fear, not to be irritable, but to act in faith. A faith that always gives me an opportunity to see that the priorities will be taken care of in the proper time and in the proper place. And I ask you to do that for the sake of Jesus Christ. Amen.